They were idiots when I worked for them. They're idiots now. The FBI was completely corrupt under Trump. This was all going on under Trump. Christy, what the federal government's done is they've taken and gone to a third party, that third party being Twitter. And oh, by the way, they've admitted that they do this routinely with all the other social media companies. So they've admitted that not only are they serially committing felonies with Twitter, they're doing it all over the place. And what Musk has done, God bless him, is shown that the federal government was working to deprive rights.
I have your book right here, Operation Dark Heart, and I wanted to talk about the Twitter files. I'm like, this is so convenient because the Twitter files are exposing just how these government agencies have censored and suppressed us like crazy, and sometimes over the stupidest things. And you have your book here, and it's like all of these reactions. You can just see black. It's just, and like we've talked about
300 plus redactions. Absolutely.
Yes. And we've talked about this before. You said some of the stuff they redacted in your book was just stupid, right?
Like the A and A team. It's like, who doesn't know what an A team is? But yes, things like that. I mean, we're talking about descriptions, observations, atmospherics, which mean absolutely nothing regarding national security. And we eventually won our First Amendment lawsuit because we could produce cleared documentation, which I used to conduct testimony for Able Danger, which was largely what I based a lot of the book off of. And so they had to give it up. So it just, to your point, does have a clear example of how the government goes about trying to use their immense power to suppress any speech they disagree with, because ultimately they didn't like my message. My message is we need to get out of Afghanistan now. We're not going to win the way we're doing it. And oh, by the way, we could have stopped 9/11. And here's why regarding Able Danger, because in the book, I disclosed my meeting with Phil Zelikow, who was the 9/11 staff director. And so we go through all of that. And I think that's what they were really about. They're trying to get people to not read that, but in the process to punish me for actually having decided to be a whistleblower, come forward and put it out there. And clearly that's what they don't like, Christy, is that anybody who stands up and says, we're going to tell you what the facts are, when those facts are very much inconvenient to the government and its narrative.
You know, everybody has come across somebody in a position of power that is power hungry. And for some reason, this silly example came to me when I used to, as a kid, go to the roller rink, and they wore these black and white shirts. And some of the refs were cool, but there was always some refs that would go around and just be like whistling like every second for the stupidest things. And that is exactly what our government agencies remind me of. Is just like they have their whistles and they're just ready. They're ready to blow on that whistle just to remind you, who's in charge. I want to get your reaction to the Twitter files on a deeper level, because gosh, there's been like 10 now. I'm starting to lose count of how many have been released. But since I only have like a minute left with you in this particular segment, I want to get your reaction just simply to, you are still suspended from Twitter?
Yes. So to that point, look, I think we're going to find that I was suspended because of the FBI, because the day I got permanently suspended, Christy, I finally got Ray Epps to respond. I was trolling Ray Epps, pointing out all of the different things he was doing regarding encouraging riots, encouraging breaching the Capitol. It's on video. And so literally within minutes of my getting him to essentially say something, I was gone. I was permanently suspended to this day. And I've got a group of folks who are trying to get me back on. God bless them. They want to return T-Spooky, and I'd be happy to be back. But yeah, it was all about the fact that I was saying things and mentioning inconvenient facts. And I think that's what got me ultimately suspended. Although, as you know, it takes very little to get people with strong opinions kicked off if that opinion goes counter to the government narrative. And that's clearly what was going on with Twitter.
Or if they don't kick you off, they just make it pretty much impossible for anybody to actually see you, like in my case, even if I have a blue Twitter bird and everything. First of all, what do you think? I just got to ask you, what do you think of Elon Musk? Do you think he's a good guy, a bad guy? Do you think that he will bring you back on to Twitter? What do you think?
I think he's a good guy overall. I think he's got his own reasons for doing what he does. I think he does everything with a calculation, and he sees benefit right now to essentially showing that the government was essentially violating the freedom of speech of all Americans and actually doing things to impact on politics, on elections. So let me be very clear on this, because I want what he's doing essentially is exposing serial violations of Title 18, Section 424, which is deprivation of rights under color of law. Christy, what the federal government's done is they've taken and gone to a third party, that third party being Twitter. And oh, by the way, they've admitted that they do this routinely with all the other social media companies. So they've admitted that not only are they serially committing felonies with Twitter, they're doing it all over the place. And what Musk has done, God bless him, is shown that the federal government was working to deprive rights under the color of law being a technical term for their illegal use of government authority. That's what they did. And I can't believe that we don't have the full spectrum of Americans upset by this. I don't get it. The progressive left should be screaming about the fact that this sort of incursion is going on. Instead, they cheer it. They're trying to go after Musk. And I think this is where Musk is going to pay a price, obviously, because as much as I think you and I would agree that exposing government corruption to this level, the left seems to have it wants this to be a common part of what they do, because the FBI has become an extension of the Democrat Party. So Musk has at least exposed that for the world to see.
Well, from a media perspective, me having been a longtime news anchor for a number of years in the system, I'm kind of blown away at how successful they've been to downplay it. They barely talk about it at all. And this is a huge story. And they barely spent any time on it, and have even just me trying to imagine being the news anchor to talk about the FBI's statement when they said that this is just more perpetuation of conspiracy theories after the evidence has been shown. I mean, are you kidding me? You're going to throw out that conspiracy theory word again? Is there anything that most surprised you that has come out from the Twitter files?
I think the most surprising thing was the direct interface or interoperability. As an operative, and you mentioned that, I had to run operations that were similar to what you're doing here. Basically, we were in an operation where we had to basically get some information out to a foreign country that was not truthful. But by putting it on the internet, the American public was going to see it too. So I had to go to the White House, Christy, twice to get approval to do this one issue. Because under EO 12333, Executive Order 12333, President Reagan signed, it says we cannot, openly lie to Americans. No, intelligence officers can't. By the way, it's still a standing requirement, which clearly the FBI violated. And so the idea here is that while we would do this on a small scale, specifically tailored to a foreign audience, the FBI has taken that foreign intelligence capability and turned it around. This explains, I actually got the Pentagon and CIA. I actually briefed Mike Pompeo when he was director, and I got permission for a concept to have the Department of Defense do a peer review of FBI's counterintelligence program. And the only person that could approve that, DOD could say, yeah, we'll do it. CIA could say, yeah, we approve it because they oversee foreign counterintelligence. It would take the president to say yes to that. And Christy, I was never permitted to talk to President Trump to get him to do it, because ultimately now we see why even those around Trump didn't want him to approve it, because the FBI was completely corrupt under Trump. This was all going on under Trump. And that's something else we need to examine in more detail. I think that's the biggest takeaway, besides the fact that they were directly interfacing. They were doing this under Trump, under Trump's administrative control, and the folks that he appointed, to include Chris Wray. So it's very, very frightening to think that this happened as far back as that, and it ended up working against the president in his reelection.
Well, how much can we excuse Trump for having bad people around him, though? I mean, the Twitter files did reveal that it was his administration that were also trying to pressure social media companies to say certain things.
My point.
We can only go so far as like, oh, it was just because he had bad people. Like, well, then he should have paid attention to who he had around him, right?
Right. Well, they gave up the Trump administration gave up the high ground when they brought in Reince Priebus to allow him to pick a lot of the senior leadership. And anybody who was actually competent and supported Trump were basically blackballed. And so there's no surprise that Chris Wray was selected a corporate guy to be the FBI guy. You've heard my issues with Bill Barr. Bill Barr came after me when I was doing an independent investigation of election fraud. So those folks were all essentially picked by those Trump allowed to be his
swampy.
advisors.
I mean, Trump said he was going to drain the swamp, and we had swampy people still around. What do you think about these calls for a church commission, a style commission for those?
Look, I why not? You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I think that the more you can get out there and stir it up and see what comes out, the more better off you're going to be. I'm all for it. And I'd like to believe we would appoint competent people to do the investigations. It would not be a witch hunt because we know there's wrongdoing. The question becomes, what do you do when you find these obvious violations, felony level violations of U.S. Code 18, Section 242, because you're going to find that in droves. And I think Wray needs to go. You need to take out the entire first three levels of the FBI's. I would disband the FBI, Christy. I would basically take its investigative mission, give it to the U.S. Marshals, counterintelligence to the Pentagon and DHS, counterterrorism to the Pentagon and DHS, and be done with them. They are redundant. They're not required in today's 21st century investigative atmosphere. And simply put, they have become a political entity that focuses only on domestic policies relating to the Democrat Party and their success. And they have done nothing to protect the country within the last 10 years.
It's absolutely astonishing the things that have come out. The FBI whistleblowers who said that they were taken off child trafficking cases to investigate people that came to the Capitol to just to hear Trump speak. I mean, that's just so insane. But speaking of January 6th, we continue to learn more about Ray Epps, and it looks like there's now a screenshot of the text that he was giving to his nephew that says, yeah, I orchestrated it. I mean, and this guy is just out. I think you're absolutely right that you getting Ray Epps to respond is what killed you on Twitter.
Yeah, I do. Look, I was trolling the guy hard because, I mean, it's obvious. Like, the guy's out the night before encouraging a riot. He's actually breaching the Capitol outer level of security with offenses, and the guy winds up on the FBI's most wanted list, and then, oh, never mind, they just take him off.
Disappears. So a theory floating around in production is that this is intentional, like it's meant to get us all angry and be like, look, it's so obvious, to maybe shield the sheer magnitude of agents, FBI people that were present there. So we were just only looking at Ray Epps. What do you think of that theory?
Yeah, no doubt. I do believe this is a distraction that's been created to support whatever you want to call them, the deep state, and their effort to kind of push attention away. But suffice it to say, I think the Republicans are going to not just look at Ray Epps, they're going to look at everybody else. And they got to pin these people down, Christine, because they have had people under oath saying we cannot comment on the number of federal officers engaged in the lead up to and the execution of the 6th January riots, which tells me everything I need to know.
I do have Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. He is the president of the London Center for Policy Research, also a best-selling author, and winning awards, and also CIA trained. I wanted to talk about that.
Sure.
All these three-letter agencies are getting a really bad name, and we're kind of just disgusted with. They kind of all get lumped in together. We're kind of disgusted with all of them. So, what is that like to have been coming from that world and kind of lumped in with how bad of a rap they're getting now?
Well, it's deserved. Look, they were idiots when I worked for them. They're idiots now. I mean, look, I know Jim Clapper. Jim is a moron. He's politically brilliant. Jim Clapper is the ultimate example of a swamp creature. Let me be very clear on this, Christy. He was a guy who essentially found a methodology of sucking up to the people above him that got him promoted over and over and over again. His political reliability over any technical competence is why he made it to where he was. Same with John Brennan. John Brennan was an analyst who became a briefer to the White House. So Jim Clapper is a swamp creature. John Brennan's a swamp creature. All these guys I call them connective tissue. And they have no redeeming quality. They simply exist for purposes of serving the political class, and they do it very well. So they're successful in that. But I worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. They're idiots. I was a whistleblower against them. And the reason I say they're idiots is not because there's not learned people there who know what they're doing. It's the fact that the leadership become compromised and simply focus to sustain the bureaucracy in the trajectory of failure, which most of these organizations are. We saw this with the Afghanistan debacle. We saw this in the issues relating to the last few years of failures relating to strikes on different targets. We saw the overwhelming murder of civilians during drone strikes. That was John Brennan's big thing. Let's just drone people. You had upward of 60% casualties of people who are not affiliated. So these are the sorts of things that are not new. And of course, able danger. Able danger was something that we DoD were doing, competing with CIA. So it's something that has been going on and on and on, and very few people have held the leadership of these organizations accountable for their organizational failures. Anytime they fail, it's like, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. Give us more money. We'll try not to have it happen again. That's it. And that's why you see them being completely unable to do their job, but completely focused on the politics which benefit them. So that's what we've seen especially in the Twitter files. You see all this collusion because it's easier to try to manipulate the thinking of Americans than do your job of collecting intelligence against foreign targets. It's just the way they work. So.
And you can read more about his battle here and the able danger situation in his highly redacted by the FBI book.
You can still make sense of it. Yeah, Christy, you can still make sense of it.
Yes, you can still make sense of it.
They made it tough.
They redacted the heck out of his book, Operation Dark Heart, and they made sure that they just plucked him from Twitter. Where we need to make sure that we are on Twitter, folks, saying bring Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer back. And it's at T-Spooky, right? Okay, I was just going to say that. Now, what you were hitting upon is there's so much deeper issues to this, because you're really talking about a culture that is true from what I've talked to people. It's true in both the military and these agencies. Is the culture itself rewards you being a yes man? Like it rewards you for not having any courage. I mean, this is something that Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, right?
Is talking.
That he talks about as well as this culture. So how do you fix a culture?
That's the thing. You need to enable those who are willing to go out and take risks. I was always known as a risk taker. Some leadership loved it. They got me promoted. Others hated it. And the honest answer is, Christy, I could have gone in every day to DIA, sat at my desk, read The Early Bird, drank coffee, and done absolutely nothing, and would have ended up at a higher promotion rate than what I did, because I felt it was my job to do those hard things of running intelligence operations, which were risky. Sometimes they worked, and people, were able to successfully get the intelligence. Sometimes they failed. Most of them worked. The grand irony is those best operations you and the public will never know about because they were successful. So you guys. You see us in a bad light because you only see our failures. Like Able Danger, yes, that was a failure, but I can tell you for every Able Danger, there was 3 others which were actually successful. But with that said, the success is always as a result of going against the system and doing the hard work and taking risks rather than going along with the bureaucracy and playing it safe. Trust me. I was once told I wasn't a good bureaucrat by a guy named Pete Klein. He was right. It was not my intention to be a bureaucrat. My intention was to get things done, which obviously normally makes us very unpopular with those who want to avoid all risk, like Jim Clapper and those guys, because they don't want any risk. They don't want anybody to rock the boat, because they'd rather see a safe failure than a spectacular success that actually requires them to accept reasonable risk for us going forward to do the things we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, and your oath to the Constitution. I mean, that's right. Seems like a big joke now. And we only touched upon this a little bit, but seeing the elections as they are, you were a whistleblower with that as well in 2020 in Pennsylvania, and you said that you were actually screamed at by Bill Barr for raising.
So the Gateway Pundits reported this a couple different times. I was in the midst of working in support of a number of whistleblowers, supporting them. And one of the investigations resulted in something I believe to this day was a legitimate full-scale operation to basically upend the vote in Pennsylvania. About 64,000 ballots were brought down from Bethpage, New York, to Lancaster to be interjected into the voting system. This was a full 30 days before the election. Jesse Morgan was the whistleblower. I did the investigation. We were ready to bring in a hybrid team of law enforcement and civilians to do to fully explore it. And we wanted to brief Bill Barr on it. Well, Bill Barr called me and said, basically, you're interfering with my investigation, and you need to turn over Mr. Morgan to the FBI today at 2 o'clock. It's like, no, he's a whistleblower. He needs protection. And God bless him. He got me fired. I was relieved. They moved Mr. Morgan down without any lawyers. Never talked to the FBI without a lawyer. Just saying. And they refused to give him whistleblower protection, which is what he was due. And next thing you know, they're attacking him, not trying to verify what he said, and it all went away. And Bill Barr was the guy who I feel violated the law in several instances, to include directing me to do something which was illegal and violating the constitutional rights of Jesse Morgan. So it's all bad.
Yeah, and I mean, we're seeing that time and time again. They go after the people that are trying to raise the attention instead of the actual criminals. Well, people, you got to get his book. I've been joking about how redacted it is, but it's still an incredible read.
You can read it. You'll
yes, you can definitely read it. It's still fascinating. Operation Dark Heart. And final words for me.
People, think for yourself. Wake up. We have a new year coming. It's going to be quite the year. You need to have a healthy skepticism of anything that's said in the media, especially after what we saw in the Twitter files. So follow us, watch the people who try to tell you the truth, and we'll do our best to educate you on what's going on as we learn things. So thank you for having me, Christy.
You bet. And let's get T Spooky back on Twitter so he can spread the word and harass people like Ray Epps again.